Morning, everyone. Yes. Good morning, morning. And so we will carry on where we left off yesterday. But before that, I will have a little bit of refreshments. Been looking at the idea of developing perceptions, which is essentially a way of looking at the world and how to see things around us, and how to kind of train the mind in a certain way of looking at things. And this is really important because, as I mentioned before, we get born into this world with delusion and misunderstanding and wrong views. And so the only way to really rectify this is to train the mind in a new direction. And of course, we know that the whole Buddhist path starts out with right view, right? So the idea of seeing things clearly is so important, and everything else really emerges from this idea of right view, which then also has to do with right perception and right thought, and all of these kind of things kind of coming together nicely. So far, we have looked at some of these perceptions, like the idea of death and old age and these things, like the realities of life, and just getting the realities of life clear and deepening that idea, making it really kind of a felt experience that we're going to die, we're going to get old, and all of these kind of things is actually very important. And you can see here how that, in many ways, is the foundation for everything in Buddhism, the foundation for the awakening of the Buddha, and then also the foundation for having success on this Buddhist path. So now, having done that, we're going to look a little bit more at other kinds of perception. And the first kind of perception we're going to look at are the perceptions that have to do with right intention, which is the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. And there's three kinds of right intention, right? There's the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, or metta, if you like, and the last one, which is the intention of non-cruelty, sometimes non-ruthlessness, and which basically is the intention of compassion. Yeah, so renunciation, compassion, and metta. And these things too are founded on perception. Yeah, we need to build up the right kind of perception. When you see the world in a certain way, then the intention arises automatically from that. So perception is the foundation, and then the metta, the compassion, and even a degree of renunciation comes from that. So this is the idea, and please don't be too afraid of the word renunciation. It doesn't mean that you have to become a monk or nun straight away. That's good news, isn't it? So you can wait a little bit, not too long, of course, but what it means is that there is a gradual renunciation, and all of you who are here are already renouncing a little bit. This is what it means to come on a retreat like this. There's already a degree of renunciation there. But, just being moral, living a good life, you have to renounce to some extent. You're giving up certain things that you can no longer do. That actually is an act of renunciation. So you're already leaning a little bit that way, right? And it's good. Yeah, it's not a big issue. But of course, we're going to look at this in a bit more detail and how we can take this even deeper, maybe, as we... sorry, excuse me. As we... doesn't like talking. Talking is bad. And this is a sign. Maybe I shouldn't talk so much. And this is kind of the sign from somewhere. Anyway, so yeah, so we're going to look at these three things. And to start off, we're going to just have a fairly brief look at a few suttas that sort of kind of give the foundation for this. Let me just take so this is nice. This is ginseng, which is kind of nice. Warm, which is good for the nice for the anyway. So I'm going to have a look at this sutta called the Samana Mundika Sutta. This is found in the middle length sayings of the Buddha, the Majjhima Nikaya, number 78. And it is a sutta that probably not talked about often. So I don't know if I've ever taught the sutta on a retreat. So sometimes you have to bring in new things. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, just to give you a little bit of a background for the discussion of these kind of perceptions. And so it says, what are unskillful thoughts? Yeah, this is very useful. What are the thoughts that are unskillful? They're thoughts of sensuality and thoughts of malice. And malice here is like ill will. Yeah, ill will really is about wanting to hurt someone else. And the last one here, it says cruelty. These are called unskillful thoughts. So the idea of cruelty here, I would say, maybe not. It is more the idea, to my mind, of being ruthless. Yeah, not caring what effect your actions have on other people. Yeah, like not having any compassion, basically, is what it comes down to. And so this is different from ill will. Ill will is when you deliberately want to hurt someone else, because you have a bad intention inside. So you're deliberately going out of your way to hurt someone through speech or actions or whatever. But ruthless, you're not deliberately wanting to hurt anyone. It's just that you don't care about the consequences of your actions. Yeah, you kind of stepping on people, this kind of thing, is not really worrying about it. You're walking down a path, there's all these insects there, and you just walk, you don't care whether you're killing insects. It doesn't mean that you have ill will towards the insects. It means you couldn't care less whether they die or not. And so these are the opposites, on the one hand, of metta and compassion. The opposite is compassion. Compassion is if you really care about the hurt of other beings, right? That's compassion. And metta is the idea of friendliness, is the opposite. You want people well rather than wanting to hurt people. Wanting to hurt people is ill will. Wanting other people to be happy, wanting their best, wanting the benefit. That's what metta is. When you have like a friend, this friendliness towards others. And sensuality here is basically the interest in the five sense world. That's really what it comes down to. Being drawn to that, being craving for the five sense world, being attached to the five sense world. So these are called unskillful thoughts. And the reason why they are unskillful is because they are, to some extent, bad karma, and they also lead you away from the Noble Eightfold Path. They are destructive for your meditation practice, etc., etc. So they lead away, and they do not lead towards awakening. It's a decline in good states, not an increase in good states. So, where do these unskillful thoughts stem from? Why do we have these unskillful thoughts? And this is where it gets interesting. Where they stem from has been stated. You should say that they stem from perception, right? We saw at the very first sutta, the Madhupindika Sutta, the Honeyball Sutta, that perception is what underlies the thoughts. So in a sense, it's kind of fascinating. Sometimes people think the suttas are boring, but when you have a little bit of understanding of your own mind, and then you compare the suttas to your mind, it's actually quite interesting. You're kind of unraveling the mechanics of the mind, how it is that we work as human beings. And when you unravel that and kind of make that understood, of course, that allows you then to take measures to move in the right direction. So actually, once you start to understand what is going on, it's actually very interesting. And you will notice that the word of the Buddha is often very concise and very precise, very short. Every word is significant. And you read it with care. You read it slowly. You don't go fast. You reflect on each step. And as you do that, the understanding of the path comes out of that. So they come from perception. What perception? Perception takes many and diverse forms. Perceptions of sexuality, malice, and cruelty. Unskillful thoughts stem from this. So there is an underlying perception that gives rise to the thinking mind. So the perception is already one that sees something positive in the sensory realm. And because you perceive something positive in the sensory realm, because you have an attraction to that, because that is your perception, and you think about it, right? Just like we saw before. So there's an underlying idea that lies in your mind. And you should be able to notice this when your mind becomes very peaceful. Yeah, and you find that you can see that suddenly a thought arises, and you will be able to see, if you are mindful, that there is a perception there that underlies that thought. Yeah, you think about something you want to do later on, like, I don't know, if you get hungry in the evening, you think, oh, I think about a nice meal. And then before that nice meal you think about, you will see there is a perception there that actually sees the beauty of that meal or whatever. Yeah, and then the thoughts arise as a consequence. So you can actually, if you are very sharp, you can see these things. And then that gives you the answer, the solution to the problem. What we have to do, we have to change our perceptions. And the whole thinking mind changes accordingly. So it's actually, what we have to change is quite small, and it has big consequences for how our mind works afterwards. So this is where these thoughts come from. Yeah, malice, a thought of ill will or whatever, or a thought of ruthlessness. These things come from, again, you have a bad perception of someone, and then the thought of ill will arises from that. Someone who you think is worthy of, whatever, worthy of not being nice to them. So then the Buddha says, where do these unskillful thoughts cease without anything left over? The cessation has also been stated. Is when a mendicant, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, or if you like, quite secluded from the five senses, secluded from unskillful qualities, enters and remains in the first absorption. This is the first jhana, which has rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. This is where these unskillful thoughts cease without anything left over. So bad thoughts stop in the first jhana. Of course, this is where they cease completely, yeah, and they are gone, and they cannot arise while you're in that state. But of course, this does not mean that we always have unskillful thoughts outside of jhana. It just means that then they are liable to arise very easily at any time. But within these states, so they are completely gone while you're in that state. So our job is to reduce them, yeah, before we get to the first jhana, and then that actually gives us easier access to this sort of samadhi, because we have reduced the unwholesome qualities beforehand. So that is where they cease. And how is someone practicing for this cessation of unskillful thoughts? It's when a mendicant, or anyone really, a layperson, generates enthusiasm, tries, makes an effort, exerts the mind, and strives so that bad, unskillful qualities don't arise, so that unskillful qualities are given up, so that skillful qualities arise, so that skillful qualities that have arisen remain, are not lost, but increase, mature, and are fulfilled by development. Someone practicing like this is practicing for the cessation of unskillful thoughts. And you will notice, yeah, if you know the Suttas a little bit, you will notice that that is the four right efforts. Yeah, right there. This is factor number 6 on the Noble Effort Path. And so these are the four right efforts. So this is how we overcome these unskillful thoughts, through exerting the mind in the right way. Yeah, so this is what we're going to talk about later on, how to exert the mind so that we overcome the unwholesome thoughts. So what is that exertion? And very briefly, we can sometimes make a distinction between two ways of making exertion. And one way of making exertion is to use the willpower, yeah, to kind of suppress the thought or whatever. And then there's the other exertion, which is giving rise to wisdom. Yeah, when you give rise to wisdom, then the mind automatically moves away from the negative thoughts because you understand that they are unskillful. And of these two ways of using the mind, using the wisdom power is far more effective. So I would really recommend you to use the wisdom power, reflect on the thoughts in the right way, reflect in the right way, and then these things are actually overcome as a consequence. There's a very interesting little sutta which I often read out of these retreats. It is called the two powers. The two, and there's actually a number of suttas called the two powers. And these two powers in the Pali are called the Patisankana Bala. Bala is power in Pali, and Bhavana Bala. Bhavana is development, Patisankana is reflection. Yes, these are the two powers, reflection and development. So when do we use which one? This is where it kind of gets interesting. The Buddha says the power of reflection is used to overcome unwholesome qualities. By body, speech, and also by mind. And this is what the power of reflection is for. Bhavana Bhava, the power of development, which really means the power of meditation, is not used for overcoming unwholesome qualities. The Bhavana Bhava is used to develop samadhi, is used to develop the 7 factors of awakening, the 4 jhanas, the samadhi, the stillness of the mind. This is a really important point. It means that sitting in meditation is not really so much about overcoming unwholesome qualities. To do that, we need to learn to reflect in the right way, to give rise to the right kind of perceptions, to have the right view, all of these kind of things. So it is a more active kind of thing, rather than just kind of passively watching the breath. So what that means is that this effort here, right effort anyway, comes before right mindfulness. Right mindfulness is about meditation, it's about watching the breath and all of these kind of things. And right effort comes before that. So it is preparing the mind for meditation, really. And the more pure, the more metta, the more compassion you have before you meditate, the more powerful will the meditation be. And the easier it will be to have joy and all of these kind of things in your meditation as a consequence. So if you have a lot of compassion and metta in your daily life, in the way you interact with people around you, then you bring that back to the meditation, and then the meditation happens as a consequence. So this is important, the idea of using wisdom to overcome the negative qualities of the mind. 4 right efforts right there. So I like this translation here. This is what the Suttas translation. You generate enthusiasm. You enthusiastic about overcoming the bad qualities of the mind. Let me just check what enthusiasm is in Pali language, because that kind of clarifies things a lot when you know the Pali word. So I'm going to have a look at this. It's nice to have the internet available right here. Middle sayings of the Buddha. This is all from Sutta Central. The middle 50 discourses, the chapter on wanderers, Sutta number 78, and the Sujatos translation. Ding, come up. Yes.
You turn that off. No, you can just play it.
Oh, it does.
You turn it off. You use this first. You change that. The transmitter battery is weak.
Shall I give it to you?
No.
Now?
This one.
Why not?
He just needs to change that.
Over there?
Yeah. You turn it off.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So let's see here, the Pali word is Samana Mandika Sutta. What's going on here? Oh, it's this long sutta, and I'm somewhere in the middle. Here we go. So Chandang Upadaya. So Chandang here is the word that is translated as enthusiasm. And Chanda is this very kind of broad idea of desire. Chanda is desire, but in a very broad way. It means desire to do good things. Already finished then? Okay. Next time I'll just have a sip of coffee, I think, while I wait. Yeah, yeah. Chanda, and chanda is this positive kind of desire, desire to do good, desire to achieve samadhi, and all these kind of things. There you are. So when we see these kind of wording, try making an effort, exerting the mind, it does not necessarily mean a lot of willpower. Often it just means using wisdom power. But even to use wisdom, you need to try a little bit, right? Otherwise the wisdom doesn't arise. So, there you are. That is practicing for the cessation of the unskillful thoughts. What are skillful thoughts? Thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of goodwill, thoughts of compassion. I think the last one is better. Harmlessness is like compassion. These are called skillful thoughts. And where do these skillful thoughts stem from? Where they stem from has been stated. You should say that they stem from perception. Yeah, so perception again is the foundation for the good quality, the good thoughts. Perception takes many and diverse forms, perceptions of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. Skillful thoughts stem from this. Yeah, so perception of renunciation, what is that? The Pali word for renunciation is nekkhamma, and nekkhamma is the opposite of kama. Kama is the five sense world. So it means like the opposite of the five sense world. Yeah? It means when you're losing a bit of interest in the five senses and you're going for the happiness within instead, the happiness of the spiritual path. Yeah, this is kind of the idea of nekkhamma. And so what does this mean? It means that you see the world is so unreliable. Sometimes this does not refer to kind of immediate pleasures like eating or whatever. That's kind of just a small thing. Don't worry too much about that. Please enjoy your food. It's really important. One of the things I always loved about Ajahn Brahmali was he said, enjoy your food. Sometimes you think that monks, we're not supposed to enjoy our food, but he said always, enjoy your food. Have a nice meal, and then you forget about it afterwards. That is the right way of eating. So this does not really refer to the fact that we shouldn't have enjoyment in the world. Yeah, you need a degree of enjoyment. A life without enjoyment is a life that is completely meaningless. So you need that inner enjoyment, and you need a little bit of enjoyment in the sensory realm as well. But what it means really is that general feeling that the sensory realm is not really satisfactory. And when you see the uncertainty in that realm, when you see the recurring wars, you see the recurring problems, how unreliable it is, how you don't know what's going to happen in the future. It is not the case that the future is always bad. That's the wrong way of thinking about it. It is just that it is so uncertain. Yeah, we just don't know what's going to happen. And this is kind of the problem with that world. So if you take refuge in that world, you hold on to that, make that important, you have a real problem. Yeah, this is why people get depressed and sad because the world is going badly or whatever. And so this is kind of how that whole world becomes yucky after a while. And this is kind of the big way. And then there's the smaller way, it's kind of related to our more personal lives. And even in our personal lives, we understand the problems of the five sense world because we know people get sick, people die. These are our relatives and the people we are very close to. And that even our personal world, it gets very problematic. So it's like the big scale five sense world and then the personal five sense world. And then we kind of start to see the downside. And then by doing that, we withdraw more within. This is how you gradually learn how to renounce that world. Yeah, you don't, you lose your reliance on that. All right then. And then we have the thoughts of goodwill then. And the perceptions of goodwill. Perceptions of goodwill is really seeing the good qualities in other people, and then wishing them well because they are your friends, they are people that you respect, and so you wish them well, coming from your heart. This is the idea of the perception of other people, seeing them as positives in your life. And then you have the perception of harmlessness. This is the perception of compassion, really. And this comes from seeing suffering in the world. Jeez. Well, this was coming to an end, but we never know how uncertain, unreliable. So compassion, yeah, and the idea of people suffering and not really being in control of their lives, yeah, and then you kind of have compassion for the world. It's perception of suffering and the perception of people not being in control, being victims, if you like, yeah. We are all victims to some extent of the world. By the mere fact of having been born into this life, we are victims of this world. Skillful thoughts stem from this. We're going to get more into details about these things soon. Actually, I was supposed to do meditation first. Is that right, Eileen? Yeah. What? This is a terrible, not up to me. I just forgot to do it. It's like, will be. Shall we do some meditation after? We do some finish off this and then do some meditation afterwards. That's a good idea? Yeah, okay, we'll do that. We have to do the meditation, otherwise that's the whole point of these retreats. So please remind me, yeah, sometimes I just, anyway. So, and where do these skillful thoughts cease without anything left over? The cessation has also been stated. It's when, as the placing of the mind and keeping it connected are stilled, a mendicant enters and remains in the second absorption, the second jhana, which has rapture and bliss born of stillness, with internal clarity and confidence and unified mind without placing the mind and keeping it connected. This is the second jhana. This is where the skillful thoughts cease without anything left over. So in the first jhana, there's still a little wobble in the mind, and that wobble stops. So that is the last remnant of skillful thoughts, and that's where they cease. And how is someone practicing for the cessation of skillful thoughts? It is when a mendicant generates enthusiasm, tries, makes an effort, exerts the mind, and strives, so that bad, unskillful qualities don't arise, and that unskillful qualities are given up, and that skillful qualities arise, and skillful qualities that have arisen remain, are not lost, but increase, mature, and are fulfilled by development. Someone practicing like this is practicing for the cessation of skillful thoughts. So there you are. One of the important points here is the sequence. So first of all, we overcome the unskillful thoughts, then we overcome the skillful thoughts. It's important to do things in the right sequence on the Buddhist path. And sometimes people, they will sit down and they will do meditation practice and they will just try to still the mind from straight away. Yeah, even though the mind may be very unskillful, that we have many bad qualities in there, they sit down and try to become peaceful right away. But that is not very a good way of doing things. Yeah, because it basically is impossible that if you have unskillful thoughts to become peaceful straight away. So it really is important to get the sequence right. You find this in a number of places in the suttas. I mentioned before the 𝐕𝐢𝐝 Sutta, the two kinds of thoughts. And there the Buddha divides up the thinking mind into the bad thoughts and the good thoughts. First of all, you overcome the bad thoughts, then you overcome the good thoughts. There's another sutta called the Earth Remover Sutta, 𝐵𝑢𝑑𝑑ℎ𝑖𝑠𝑡 Sutta. Agutta 3 is number 101, which I often also read out on retreats. Maybe I should read it out again. It's a bit of a while since I did it now, probably pre-COVID. That's like a long time ago, pre-COVID, isn't it? Sounds like a different era, a different kind of a part of world history, pre-COVID and post-COVID. We're now in the post-COVID era. So maybe we should bring it up again. So this sutta shows you how the thinking mind has different levels of defilements. There are the really coarse defilements that make you break your 5 precepts. Then there are the defilements that make you think bad thoughts, such as what we see here. And then there are the really refined defilements after that. And you have to start with the bad ones. Yeah? If you try to start with the refined ones, it's not going to work. You start with the bad ones. You know yourself. You know your weaknesses. You know what your problems are. Then you deal with those. Then the new problems arise, like the middling defilements. Then you deal with those. And then you deal with the really refined ones. The really refined ones are things like thoughts about family, thoughts about your reputation, thoughts about your nation, and these kind of things. Yeah? These are thoughts that have to do with your identity. Yeah? And sometimes we think about our identity to kind of solidify our sense of self, because meditation also dissolves your sense of self a little bit. Yeah? Actually, it's really nice not to have a sense of self. It really feels really good. But self is a big nuisance. The ego is a big problem. The less ego, the better usually. Yeah? But you have to do that in the right order. If you try, start with anatta. And I think this is why many people don't understand this concept of non-self, because you start trying to understand something very profound when the mind still has a lot of problems in it, defilements in it. It is possible. You just go into loops, and after a while you go crazy here. Please don't go crazy here. Yeah, because if you go crazy, that's not what we're here for, to go crazy. We're here to become more sane. Yeah, so be careful. And sometimes you do find that people go on meditation retreats, and because they're not wise in how they use their mind, they come out a bit more crazy than when they started out. That's bad news. But they're there to become more sane, not more crazy. So watch your mind, what you're doing. Know whether if you start to feel a bit unbalanced or deluded or whatever, then okay, come out, you're doing something isn't working right. Yeah, so stop. Don't allow yourself to go into a kind of a psychosis or anything like that. That is usually a very bad idea. If you live with a little bit of wisdom, shouldn't be necessary for anyone to go nuts on a meditation retreat. Sometimes it happens, unfortunately. And usually it happens because people just carry on, regardless of what is happening in the mind, and eventually the mind just can't take it anymore. So do things gradually, get the sequence right, understand what your main problems are and issues are, deal with those, and then gradually carry on like this. All right. We go on to the next one. Now, Sutta, this is from the 𝐵𝑢𝑑𝑑ℎ𝑖𝑠𝑡 𝐹𝑒𝑙𝑙𝑙𝑜𝑤𝑠ℎ, the miracle discourses, the chapter on the sixes, and Sutta number 110. Is there lots of suttas there? And so let's see what this one has to say. It's really just a continuation of the previous one. Mendicants, there are these three things. Usually, Dhamma is what things is a translation of Dhamma. What three? Sensual perceptions of ill will, of malicious perceptions, and then ruthless perceptions. These are the three things. To give up these three things, you should develop three things. What three? You should develop the perception of renunciation, to give up sensual perceptions. You should develop the perception of goodwill, metta, to give up the ill will or malicious perceptions. You should develop the perception of harmlessness or compassion, to give up the ruthless perceptions or the cruel perceptions. These are the three things you should develop to give up those other three things. So here again, we are talking about the development of perception. Yeah, now it gets very kind of practical, down to the workings of our minds. And so this is very useful. So let me again check what the Pali is here, because that is always very exciting to know the Pali. I hope you agree with that. And if you don't agree, I will check anyway. So I'm a very naughty monk. Ajahn Brahmali will be proud of me now. Right. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, so okay, so it's not all that interesting, it does the opposite, the ill will and then the non-ill will, yeah? So it doesn't actually say metta, but that is the main way we develop non-ill will there. Yeah, so this is how you overcome the bad ones, cultivate the good ones, and the bad ones just disappear as a consequence. That is good to know. Let us move straight on to the next sutta. And this is from the Samyutta Nikaya, the SN, these are the connected discourses. Chapter 14, this is the Dhatu Samyutta, Dhatu, the elements or the properties, connected discourses on elements or properties. Having a source is the name of the sutta, with the source. And it goes as follows. At Savati. Bhikkhus. Oh, bhikkhus. What are that doing there? Bhikkhus. You're the mendicants, right? What has happened? Whose translation it is? Is it Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation? Don't think so. And how is this so? It doesn't sound like Bhikkhu Bodhi. I think maybe Ajahn Sujanto is not being consistent. Anyway, so you must have missed one, I think. Yes. All right. So, bhikkhus, sensual thoughts arise with a source, not without a source. Thoughts of ill will arise with a source, not without a source. Source of harming arise with a source, not without a source. And how is this so? In dependence on the sensuality element or property, there arises sensual perception. In dependence on sensual perception, there arises sensual intention. In dependence on sensual intention, there arises sensual desire. In dependence on sensual desire, there arises sensual passion. In dependence on sensual passion, there arises the sensual quest or pursuit, if you like. Engaged in the sensual pursuit, the uninstructed worldling conducts himself wrongly in three ways, by body, speech, and mind. So this is the problem with the sensuality. It leads to, ultimately down the track, it leads to bad actions. And I think you can all see how that is the case. So the sensual element here, what does that mean? And it just means that there is such a thing as sensuality. This property or this quality exists. Yeah, there is such a quality, and if we perceive things in a certain way, then that quality, that property manifests in our perception. And so dependent on that property existing, that potential existing within us, the perceptions of the sensuality arise. Yeah, so it just means that these are possibilities in the mind. Yeah, this is what it means, the idea of dhatu here. If there was no possibility, it wouldn't be possible to perceive with sensuality. And of course, once you have the perception of sensuality, that means that you are perceiving the sensual world as somehow good, positive, nice. Yeah, this is really what it comes down to, perception of sensuality. Then you will intend towards that sensuality. You will want to achieve it because you see it as good, nice, productive of happiness, and you will pursue sensuality as a consequence. You have intentions, you aim for these things. It becomes your purpose to live a sensual life. And this is why people pursue money and power, because money and power give you access to many things, including sensual pleasures. And so then the desire comes from the intention. You desire these things, and because you desire them, you become passionate about them, and then you pursue them. You quest for the sensual things. You wander around the world in your life, looking out for sensual objects to consume. And this is kind of what your life becomes about. You wander up and down Orchard Road, yeah, looking at all the kind of terrible shops and wanting to buy stupid things that don't really satisfy you. And this is like life, yeah, for many people. And then because you engage in these things, and this is one of the things I was saying yesterday, because that world we often are in competition with others, yeah, because of that competition with others, we often end up in conflict, and then we do things both by body, speech, and mind that are problematic, yeah. It is one of the things that our entire economic system is based on the idea of a competition. Yeah, this is kind of how the capitalist system, which is the one system that we pretty much all countries are tied to these days, is based on the idea of competition. And whenever there is competition, there's going to be winners and losers, and some people will gain the central place, others will not. And so there is a certain degree of conflict built into our economic system. I'm not saying that there is any better alternatives. I'm just saying that that is the nature of the beast, yeah, whatever we like it or not. I'm not suggesting that there is anything better necessarily. I'm just saying this is the nature of the world, yeah, whether we want to or not. And so the whole system is geared towards a degree of conflict. And that's why, of course, it can get so problematic when we end up doing bad things as a consequence. Body, speech, and mind, we do bad things. So, independence on the ill will element. Yeah, the fact that there is such a thing as ill will, the property of ill will, if you like, there arises the perception of ill will. Or the perception of, the perception of, ill will, I suppose. Yeah, it's a particular way of just looking at people with ill will. Independence of that, there arises the intention of ill will. You want to harm someone. And then depends on that, there arises the desire driven by ill will. Independence on desire driven by ill will, there arises passion driven by ill will. Independence on passion driven by ill will, there arises the quest driven by ill will. So you have ill will quest, you are run by ill will. Ill will is the engine that drives you forward. Engage in the quest driven by ill will, the uninstructed worldly conducts himself wrongly in three ways, by body, speech, and mind. In this case, it's much more obvious that you are conducting yourself badly, because ill will, is what it tends to do. And so you do bad things, stupid things, things that are deluded, and not understanding what is useful or whatever, and then you end up, of course, making lots of karma, bad karma, and destroying your own life and also the life of people around you. We are all victims and perpetrators. I think this is a nice way of thinking about life very often. Instead of thinking of some people as victims and some people as perpetrators, we are all victims and perpetrators. We all oppress each other to some degree. And this kind of black and white idea that some people are victims and some are perpetrators, and some people are bad, some people are good, is a very naive way of thinking about the world. It's much more complicated than that. Things are not black and white, things come in shades of gray in this world. That is a much more conducive way to think about life. It means that we don't judge so harshly. It means that we have more time for all kinds of people. There's a tendency, maybe driven by the internet and driven by simplistic thinking, to divide the world into good and bad. Bad people, you take sides in conflicts, like in the Middle East. Who is right? Are the Jews right, or are the Palestinians right? And people tend to take sides. But actually, both sides are perpetrators and victims. Both sides deserve compassion. Both sides deserve understanding. And that is the right way of thinking from a Buddhist point of view. Instead of, labeling some people as bad or whatever. And then you can overcome the ill will then. Everyone is a perpetrator, everyone is a victim. Independence on the harmfulness element or the ruthlessness element, there arises perception of ruthlessness. Independence of the perception of ruthlessness, there arises the intention to be ruthless. Independence of the intention to be ruthless, there arises the desire to be ruthless. Independence of the desire to be ruthless, there arises the passion to be ruthless. Dependence on the passion to be ruthless, there's the desire, the ruthless quest, that's nice of putting it, the ruthless quest, the ruthless pursuit, pursuing whatever you think is beneficial for you, power, work, sensual pleasures, whatever, in a ruthless way, not caring about how it affects the people around you. Engaged in the quest, the ruthless quest, the uninstructed world, and conducts himself wrongly in 3 ways, by body, speech, and mind. Take a drink? Okay. Ha. Okay. Can we carry on? Yeah, okay, we can carry on. All right, so then we come to a big simile. Suppose, bhikkhus, that a man would drop a blazing grass torch into a thicket of dry grass. If he does not quickly extinguish it with his hands and feet, the creatures living in the grass and wood will meet with calamity and disaster. So too, if any ascetic or Brahmin does not quickly abandon, dispel, obliterate, and annihilate the unrighteous perceptions that have arisen in him, he dwells in suffering in this very life, with vexation, despair, and fever, and with the breakup of the body after death, a bad destination may be expected for him. So this is a reference specifically to ascetic and Brahmins, so people who have kind of taken on the monastic life, if you like. But this is what can be expected to happen. So you have to, you can see here, use a very strong words: abandon, dispel, obliterate, and annihilate. Very strong words. And again, the idea here, when you see these kind of words, you have to be very careful with the interpretation of these words. It may sound like you use an enormous amount of willpower, you get out the sledgehammer and you hammer these things to smithereens, there's nothing left, you pulverize these evil perceptions. But that would be the wrong understanding of what is going on, because these words are used elsewhere, and they are used in the connection with using wisdom and not using willpower. Yeah, and I think I find this very interesting, because if you want to obliterate something, if you want to dispel something, then using willpower is not going to work. Yeah, because willpower, what can you do? You hold things down. It's like if you have a kettle that is boiling, yeah, you can hold it down with willpower for a while, then it kind of really erupts after a while. And so the idea of wisdom power, if you want to obliterate, really get rid of a negative thought, the way to do that is to look at the situation differently. And as you look at the situation differently, the foundation for the thought is gone. And because the foundation for the thought is gone, it really gets annihilated and obliterated. It is the only way to obliterate a thought is in this way. Yeah. So that is kind of interesting. Yeah. Wisdom power, more powerful than willpower. In fact, obliteration can only happen through wisdom power. This, you can see here how interpreting the suttas is takes a bit of understanding to see these things in the right way. So that is the idea here. So you use that wisdom power to overcome those unrighteous perceptions. Yeah, you change your perceptions in your mind and you move towards goodwill. Yeah, metta, compassion, away from the ill will, away from all these other things. And instead of too much sensuality and greed in the sensory realm, you move towards giving things up a little bit, which really starts with the 5 precepts, and then it carries on from there now. So that is the idea here. It's kind of interesting, isn't it, that you dwell in suffering in this very life, vexation, despair, and fever, if you have too many of these negative perceptions. Yeah, these are states of suffering. And this is kind of fascinating because it is the opposite of how the world thinks about these things. The world thinks about the perceptions of sexuality as something positive. Yeah, it leads to happiness, and you go and indulge and you enjoy yourself. And so they think of it as positive. Actually, it is vexation. And of course, when you have a little bit of understanding, it is kind of obvious why that is the case. It is the case because when you have too much of these desires, too much greed, you are separated from where you want to be. And you have this lack of contentment inside, this restlessness, this agitation, this thing which does not feel peaceful at all. You are the slave of craving, as it says so beautiful in the Suttas. The craving is the master, and you obey the master, and you keep running around, right? Running, like that famous dog yesterday outside the butcher shop. That is us sometimes, running from one butcher shop to the next one, never really finding satisfaction. And after a while, you get fed up with running around. You get tired, you get exhausted, and you understand that actually a bit of peace and contentment would be so nice. So these are sufferings, and it's very useful to be able to gain a little bit of insight into that. Anyway, let us go on to the other half of this sutta. Because the thought of renunciation arises with a source, not without a source. Thoughts of non-ill will, or if you like, thoughts of metta, arise with a source, not without a source. Thoughts of compassion arise with a source, not without a source. And how is this so? It depends on the renunciation element. In other words, the existence of renunciation, if you like, there arises perceptions of renunciation. In dependence on the perception of renunciation, there arises the intention of renunciation. In dependence on the intention of renunciation, there arises the desire for renunciation. In dependence on the desire for renunciation, there arises the passion for renunciation. In dependence on the passion for renunciation, there arises the quest for renunciation. Engaged in the quest for renunciation, the instructed, of course, noble disciple conducts himself rightly in three ways, by body, speech, and mind. So, what are we? Are we the instructed noble disciple, or are we the uninstructed worldling? Well, I think we are somewhere in between, We're trying to move from the uninstructed worldling to the instructed noble disciple. That's kind of what we are trying to do now. And so we are hopefully heading a little bit in that direction now. So the perception of renunciation, the perception of being a little bit fed up with the five sense world, understanding its downsides, its dangers, understanding how it never live up to its billing, always letting you down in one way or another. You then turn towards renunciation. Renunciation is kind of a scary word, right? In English, renouncing something, it sounds like you're giving up something nice, and who knows whether you're going to get anything in return. Maybe you're just giving up something nice and getting nothing in return. And that is a bad deal. We want good deals. Is that right? We want good deals, right? And I think this is always in life, we want good deals. I remember this is a story my father told me a long time ago. And he said that my father was kind of always traveling a lot internationally because this was his business. It took him around the world. And at one point he was in Malaysia, and they were having some dinner in the evening, business dinner or whatever, and he was sitting next to this woman who was an executive or something in Malaysia, and somehow they came to talking about religion. I don't know why, because I think this was, my father was not really a very religious person. And she told him that she had converted from Buddhism to Christianity. And so my father asked, why? I don't know why he asked why, but anyway, he asked why. And she said, because Christianity is a better deal. That's really you just believe and you go to heaven. Buddhism, some of the things you have to do. But of course, it is not necessarily true. If there was no God, then you have a problem, right? So much more important than just getting an empty good deal, be realistic really is important. Otherwise, we have a serious problem. And anyway, so this, I'm not sure how I got there, but we're talking a bit about renunciation and giving up, and it is a good deal in the same way. That's where it came from. It is a good deal because when we renounce, actually we're moving towards something better. That's the whole point. Renunciation sounds like a terrible idea. Actually, it's a really good idea. You give up the coarser things to achieve something more refined. That is the whole purpose of this. And this is where we're trying to go with our meditation practice and with the practice of the spiritual life. So renunciation is a positive thing. So we have the perception of renunciation, the idea that it works, the idea that we give up something coarse and we achieve something more refined as a consequence. And then from that idea, then the intention arises. The intention is the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. And then in the dependence of that intention, which is the purpose, which is the aim, which is the goal that we're trying to achieve, then the desire arises. We start to act in accordance with that. We start keeping the precepts. We start acting with kindness. This is a kind of renunciation right there. We give up the coarser aspects of the world because we understand they are problematic. And from that desire comes the passion for renunciation. You become passionate about renouncing. That's kind of cool. That's kind of where you are on the cusp of shaving off your hair and becoming a monastic, maybe. And then from that passion for renunciation comes the quest for renunciation. That's kind of cool, the quest for renunciation. You're really getting into it now. And because you are into that, you do good by body, speech, and mind. So if you are the kind of person who does a lot of good by body, speech, and mind, it means you are already renouncing a lot. You are already kind of engaged in some of the fruits of renunciation right there. That is wonderful. You're already kind of doing this. So that's good. And if you can take it further, please do so. Independence on non-ill will, on the non-ill will element. In other words, the fact that there is such a thing as metta or whatever, there arises the perception of metta. In dependence on the perception of metta, there arises the intention to have metta. Depends on the intention of metta, arises the desire to have metta, guided by metta, if you like. In dependence on the desire guided by metta or the desire to have metta, these are two slightly variations in the translation, the desire to have metta and the desire guided by metta. They both are true at the same time, so to speak. Arises the passion to have metta. And dependent on the passion to have metta, there arises the quest for metta, or the quest guided by metta. I think both are true translations here, but certainly the quest to have metta is correct, is certainly part of it. Engaged in the quest guided by metta, the instructed noble disciple conducts himself rightly in three ways, by body, speech, and mind. When you're guided by metta, or even if you are just searching for it, then you will tend to do the right thing, live in a good way. That thing you gave me, Panghong, was really good. It seems to be working. I shouldn't say this as soon as you say this whole thing, but anyway, so far, so good. Independence on harmlessness, compassion element, the reality of compassion, there arises perception of compassion. Independence on the perception of compassion, there arises the intention of compassion. Dependence on the intention of compassion, arises the desire for compassion. Depends on desire for compassion, there arises the passion for compassion. The passion for compassion. Okay. It depends on the passion for compassion, there arises the quest or the pursuit of compassion. Engaged in the quest for compassion, the instructed noble disciple conducts themselves rightly in three ways, by body, speech, and mind. Suppose, bhikkhus, a man would drop a blazing grass torch into a thicket of dry grass. If he quickly extinguishes it with his hands and feet, the creatures living in the grass and wood will not meet with calamity and disaster. So too, if any ascetic or Brahmin quickly abandons, dispels, obliterates, and annihilates the unrighteous perceptions that have arisen in him, he dwells happily in this very life, without vexation, despair, and fever, and with the breakup of the body after death, a good destination may be expected for him. So there you are. Yeah, you have to extinguish those bad perceptions, get rid of them, annihilate them, and then you will be heading in the right direction. And the consequence, you will have a happy existence here and now, and you will have a future good rebirth. Win-win situation. Cannot lose by having metta and compassion. Yeah, people think, oh, other people will walk over you. No, you will be happy if you have compassion and metta. That is the truth. Don't allow people to walk over you, of course, but still have metta and compassion for them while they try to walk all over you, but you don't allow them to do that. So that is the, again, just a little bit more kind of background. The next sutta that we get to is how to do this in practice. And this is one of the suttas I read out on every retreat because I think it is really, really important. And so that will be the next session. So should we have a short break and do some meditation together? Is that a good idea? Is everyone, yeah? We're doing things a little bit reverse. So let's have a 10-minute break and then do some meditation in 10 minutes time.